We're going to be focusing on specifically our GAP plans. And this is just an introductory GAP webinar. We're going to have a GAP 2.0 webinar, and I'll get into that a little bit later as far as we'll go into more depth about selling strategies. But the purpose of this webinar is to really go ahead and get our agents and brokers familiar with GAP. You know, we're going to go over things like medical gap in the marketplace, positioning strategies, you know, medical gap and action, and why OptiMed, right? My name's George Lose. I'm Vice President of Sales here at OptiMed Health Plans. I've been working here for approximately 8 years, marketing specifically GAP programs like we're going to speak about today. We also at OptiMed have limited medical, dental, vision, minimum essential coverage products, MEC products. So if you would like more or additional information about those products for any of your groups, feel free to reach out to your sales representative at the end of the presentation. Also, if you would like marketing materials, brochures, proposals, we'll go over that as well. Reach out to your sales representative after the presentation. They'd be more than happy to get you any information that you're looking for. Your group rep should have been the person that sent you the invitation to the webinar itself. So first, we're going to talk about medical gap in the marketplace. So what is GAP, right? And yes, it's a primary component to your underlying major medical program. Meaning what we're trying to do is ensure deductible and coinsurance as it applies to a major medical program. When what we're trying to accomplish is that your group, your client, can select a major medical program that has higher out-of-pocket expenses for things like deductible, coinsurance, or higher copays. And then we come in and fill that hole, that void you're creating for the employee with our GAP program by filling in, by providing benefits for and paying for those, reimbursing those expenses, and hopefully doing it cheaper, meaning that our GAP premium plus your new major medical premium will be less than the major medical premium that the group is paying now. So that's really the what and why, right? But what we don't want you to associate it with is something like an afterthought, meaning it's not a voluntary product per se. It can be offered on a voluntary basis, but this isn't something where most of the brokers who are implementing a GAP strategy right now with their groups are going in with a voluntary offering. Most of the times our groups are 100% employer paid or employer contribution of at least like 25 to 50%. And it's offered in conjunction with the group major medical program. So that if you're getting the group major med, you're getting the GAP at the same time. And your employee only rate is whatever, $100 per month. And out of that $100, some of it's going to the major med and some of it's going to the GAP. Because what they're doing in that strategy is creating a better overall medical plan for the employee while lowering the cost of the overall medical premiums for the group, and in essence, making everyone happy as a broker. But what GAP is specifically trying to do is offset the rising costs of medical expenses, such as deductible, coinsurance, and copays for the employee, right? So everybody complains about their out-of-pocket expenses. And let's face it, I mean, next year the proposed is $7,900 for an out-of-pocket expense. At what point in time do we get to $10,000, right? Is that 2021, 2022? Where, you know, your maximum out of pocket as a single is going to be $10,000. So when you would poll or ask a group of individuals, what do you consider to be a major medical program? I would say that the vast majority of the population that isn't in the industry would say, well, it's something that would cover me for like doctor's office visits, or if I needed, you know, an MRI, it would give me benefits for that, or if I had to go in the hospital, you know, it would provide benefits for that. Right, but when you're talking about $10,000 deductible, $7,900 for next year, $7,150, $7,350 out of pockets, you're you're talking about a plan that for the vast majority of employees is never going to pay a dollar in benefits towards things that they need, like doctor office visits or lab or surgeries or hospital confinement. So in essence, what do you really have when we're talking about major medical, right? You're talking about a critical illness policy. If I ask you, I have a policy in place that 95 to 99% of my group's not going to be able to cash in a dollar of benefits on, and covers them for catastrophic things, but really doesn't cover the small things real well, you'd think, oh, you're talking about a critical illness plan then. But that's not the case. That's the major med plan. And we have statistics in here that we'll go over, but most people aren't going to spend more than about $2,000 to $3,000 or have more than $2,000 to $3,000 in medical expenses for the year. So if you're not covering the vast majority of those expenses, then what's the point? I mean, that's what a major medical plan is for most people. Because what GAP becomes is the primary insurance, the thing that somebody relies on, because when they go to the doctor, they're forced to pay the entire bill. So if that's a $100 bill after their discounts through their major medical program, they're responsible for paying that $100. So when we pick that cost up and pay that, right, through our GAP program, so that they don't owe anything for that office visit, or they need to get an MRI and we pick up the vast majority or the whole entire cost of that MRI procedure, or if they have a maternity claim and have a $5,000 deductible and we wind up paying that $5,000 out of pocket for that member, they value our program more than they value, the major medical program. And that's what we're talking about with GAP. That's the power of GAP. And the later that you get into the game, especially unless you think that major medical premiums are going to start sliding backwards, meaning that all of a sudden the Blues and the UHCs and the Aetnas of the world are going to start giving phenomenal rates on $500 deductible, $10 copay plans, right? Unless you think it's going to slide backwards to where you're going to see great rates on those types of programs, I don't see that trend. And we're going to talk about some of the trends in this presentation, but I don't see that trend happening. I see the trend to where major medical wants to become more like critical illness, and it's going to be relied upon the group to figure out, right, through traditionally you look at HSA arrangements or HRA arrangements to help fill in these gigantic holes for the employee. They're leaving that on the group to figure that out, or the employee. You figure out how to fund your everyday needs. We're trying to cover you for more of the catastrophic losses, something that would be more than $7,900 in the course of the year. Because you could probably go to the doctors, get an MRI, go to a specialist, get some prescription drugs, and still not hit $7,900 in out of pocket, probably only become even half of that. And the employee is paid for all those expenses out of their pocket. And that's what the GAP plan is specifically designed to do, is reimburse those expenses so that the employee is thrilled with their medical coverage now, because it doesn't matter that the major med has a $7,900 deductible, because we're filling in the vast majority, or at least majority or part of that hole for the employee, especially when we do it on a first dollar coverage basis, where there is no deductible on our GAP program. We're paying first dollar. For the vast majority of good utilizers, somebody who just needs to go to the doctors a few times a year and get some lab work done, they're going to have almost no out of pocket for the year, and they're going to be thrilled and happy. And those that are higher utilizers that have conditions or, just have an accident, whatever the case may be, they're not going to wind up with massive out of pocket expenses to have a surgery, to have a child. So that's why GAP is so important in today's marketplace. And, what we want to try to do is to, push, the message out there, right, to our broker community, that this is something that you should be looking at. And if you don't have this in your toolbox when you go out to a group or buy into the strategy, you're really missing out on the boat. And the only thing I didn't touch on is it's not Medigap. So but it works very similar to Medigap in the sense that, when you have a Medicare supplement policy, right? And we'll go into how to utilize your benefits on the plan, on the program later in the presentation. But like Medigap, Medicare has Medicare supplement policies. Why? Because Medicare doesn't cover things phenomenally. Sure, it covers hospitalization great and has Medicare Part A and Part B for physician service, but you know, the reason why they came up with Medigap plans was that to not only just give them a network and discounts through that, but to also help cover some of the out-of-pocket expenses that people that were on Medicare had. And that's exactly what we're doing, because major medical is becoming more like Medicare, where, yeah, it's good coverage if I have a $100,000 hospital stay. Yeah, I only owed $5,000 of that. So because I had a major medical policy, just like if you were in Medicare, you would go into the hospital and you wouldn't have to owe $1 million because you went into the hospital. But what about the things that people need on an everyday basis, whether it's a simple strep throat test or an office visit or a advanced diagnostic test, or they have to go to an emergency room, right, because they broke their leg or need a stitch? What happens in those scenarios where I get a $2,000 bill because my ER visit's subjected to deductible and I broke my leg? So those are the type of expenses that we're trying to help with the employee with, and reimbursing those expenses so that the employee doesn't get hit with that $2,000 bill. They pay nothing or a portion of it, and they're thrilled with their medical coverage because they see it in action. So trends, right? Like I said, rising healthcare costs are leading to shifts, right? And it's really about income and more people living day to or week to week, paycheck to paycheck, right? And out-of-pocket expenses are just continuing to rise, right? You have limited carrier choices. Some carriers are consolidating. So it's not like you have 20 different major medical carriers that you can go to, especially in certain areas. You might have 2, maybe 4. So you have less options as far as carriers to try to switch groups to. So I got a 12% renewal, or I got a 20% renewal from XYZ major medical carrier. Who can I go to? Well, there's less and less people to shop it around to. So brokers are looking at more like self-funding arrangements. Well, you could just look at a gap strategy instead of trying to shuffle groups around from carrier to carrier to carrier every year. You can keep them with the same carrier, give them a gap program by choosing a higher out-of-pocket major medical plan through the same carrier, fill it in with the gap, and save the group money on their premium. And the broker reality is that eroding commissions are every day. They're seeing less and less. I hear some states it's under 100. They have to negotiate out a PVPM with the group. They don't pay commissions. So as you see the broker community get their commissions hit, GAP pays commissions. Unlike your typical HRA, HSA, where you're normally not going to make commissions, right? So that's why it's a triple win, and I've been saying this now for 8 years. There's no other program that I know of, and if somebody has one, I'd love to hear about it. But I don't know of anyone that is a win-win for all parties that are involved in the transaction, meaning you can go in and show your group a saving on their healthcare premiums by just simply moving them to a higher out-of-pocket maximum, whether that's deductibles, co-insurance, or co-pays. Give the employee that's on that plan first dollar coverage for that out-of-pocket expense so that therefore they should have limited exposure or the same type of exposure that they had on their previous major medical program that had, you know, a lower deductible, because we're coming in with first dollar coverage. So the employee should be thrilled. Plus, in addition to just GAP benefits, we have additional features, additional non-insured benefits that we throw into the GAP program that makes it even better. Things like patient advocacy and telephonic doctor office visits, which we'll get into. But now you're talking about a program that not only is going to give them first dollar coverage for their medical expenses, you're also going to get these added extra features in there. The employee should be thrilled by that. And then the broker wins because we're going to pay commissions on the GAP program. And most brokers typically see somewhere between 20 to 50% increase in their commission by utilizing a GAP strategy, meaning that group, if it made you X last year, by implementing a GAP strategy, it should make you the following year somewhere between 25 to 50. Now, obviously, That's it varies by group to group and how much gap you're doing and, that type of stuff. But even though you're lowering the major medical premium for the group, right, you think, oh, I'm lowering my commissions. No, because the GAP program pays commissions. So therefore, and we pay 15% first year in renewal. Since we're paying commissions on that GAP program, the GAP commissions plus your major medical commissions should be higher than what you made the previous year. So like I said, I know of no other program out there that can help brokers make additional income, solve a problem for a group in lowering their major medical costs and lowering their major medical premiums overall, and make the employees ecstatic by having first dollar coverage for their medical expenses, primary insurance that they can rely upon. So if I need to get an MRI done or I need to go to the emergency room, I don't have to be fearful because of the fact that I have this high deductible plan. And then I'm worried about getting a bill for, $2,000 or $5,000 because I'm doing this. So therefore the employees win out. There's no other one, like I said, there's no other strategy that I'm aware of out there that can accomplish all three of those things. And that's why if you're in the broker community and you're not utilizing this strategy right now, you are really missing out. Because if you could make additional commission, what does that mean? That means that if you make on your entire block an extra 25 to 50%, that means you can hire an account manager to go ahead and service your groups even better. I don't have time in my day to service the groups that I would really like to give them the service that they want and deserve, but I'm just too busy trying to go around and sell business, right? Well, by making additional commission, you can have the ability now to hire somebody that can give them the greatest customer service. You have OptiMed in place as the primary insurance company. Our customer service is phenomenal at OptiMed, and we'll get into, OptiMed itself. But our customer service is phenomenal. You'll have somebody that actually answers a live telephone call and that understands the GAP program that can help an employee walk through either a claim processing situation or just answering a general question about, what does my GAP plan cover, inpatient and outpatient? There's no other program out there like this. And the later, like I said, you get into the game of GAP, the worse off you're going to be. And why is first dollar so important, right? And this is when we're going to talk about getting into some statistics, right? You got 56 million Americans under the age of 65 are going to have trouble paying their medical bills. And 40% of people with high deductibles said they had not gone to a doctor when they were sick because of their deductible. So what does that do, right? What does that mean? What that means is George is having numbness in his arm. So because he's on a high deductible plan, instead of just going to the doctors and getting some simple lab tests done because he's on this high deductible plan and he's worried about all these expenses, he doesn't go to the doctors. But then what happens? 2 weeks from now, he has a stroke or a heart attack and is in intensive care and in the hospital for 3 weeks or a month. And then what happens? All of a sudden, your group gets a 30% renewal increase because they had a $250,000 claim hit. Instead of having that employee have GAP coverage that would have paid for the office visit, paid for the lab, if they had to get an advanced study like a stress test, could have went and got the stress test, had coverage for it, had reimbursement for it, not had to pay out of pocket for it, and guess what? It could have just been a simple pill that he could have taken to prevent that heart attack. Or they could have recognized that there was something wrong and got him into surgery to prevent the stroke from happening. So instead of being hit with a $250,000 claim, a $500,000 claim, you're getting hit with the major medical companies getting hit with very little, if anything, and the GAP's paying that portion of the employees out-of-pocket expense. So now you don't get a 25% renewal on their major med next year because that situation never happened. And again, I don't see the trend going backwards where they're going to say, oh, if you want a stress test and this and that, $10 copays all around, and we'll give you very good rates on that. I don't see that happening. So therefore, if that's not going to happen, how are you going to help alleviate that problem? And that's what GAP does when you put it on a first dollar basis. And 43% of adults surveyed said their deductible is difficult or impossible to afford. Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking about a $5,000 deductible for somebody that makes $50,000 a year. That's 10% of their income annually that they have to fund, right? In order to essentially meet their out-of-pocket if they needed to. So it's not surprising that people, that's after they paid their premiums for that, which probably accounted for probably 5% of their income annually. So now they want another 10% to fund the deductible. And if you're a family, well, now you got $10,000 that you have to look at, right? So it's not surprising to me that 43% of adults said that their deductible is almost impossible to fund. And as we continue to climb the ladder, now when we're talking about $7,350, $7,900, and like I said, in a few years from now, $9,000. I mean, to that $50,000 person, you're talking about now that's 25% of their income for health insurance if they have a $9,000 deductible plus premiums. That's insane. So that's what the GAP is designed to do, is help alleviate that. Now, positioning strategies, right? What are ideal groups? Really any group, but more specifically, ideal groups that have significant rate increases at renewal, right? Anything that's like a 5, 10, 20 or worse, and essentially are looking for a solution, right? I need to lower that. So how do I lower that? By not, and at the same time, not sacrificing benefits, right? Because I don't want to, give my employees a $7,900 out-of-pocket maximum plan and just say, well, sorry, that's the only thing I can afford. I have valuable employees that I would like to keep. I have valuable employees that, are going to potentially leave my company if I give them a $7,900 deductible. And to try to replace those employees, if when they come in for an interview, I say, oh, here's the major medical plan, it's a $7,900 deductible or out-of-pocket maximum, maybe they don't come to me. So it's really for groups that want and care about their employees, because if they don't care about their employees, then yeah, they'll say, $7,900 deductible, fine, don't care. I don't contribute the bare minimum, or I contribute nothing to the major medical plan anyway, and I don't care if the employees have good coverage or not. I just offer it just to offer it. All right, probably not the best group for us, right? That's where you talk about voluntary offerings. But those groups that want to give good benefits to their employees would love to have a $500 deductible, $10 copay plan, but just simply can't afford the premium for it because it's outrageous. But want that type of plan, well, you can offer that with GAP. It works best with HDHP plans, high deductible health plans, in that we can cover. So for example, you have a $5,000 deductible, everything subjected to the deductible besides RX. RX would have copays. Those would be the best plans that would work in conjunction with our GAP, because we can cover the eligible expenses under inpatient or outpatient as far as the office visits are concerned, the lab work, diagnostic, surgery, confinement, emergency room. Since all those things are subjected to deductible, all of those things are GAP eligible. So therefore, those plans should give you the cheapest option other than a straight HSA plan. You can use it with an HSA plan design. The issue is, and I think we get into a little bit about exclusions, but we don't cover RX under the GAP program. So the employees would have to pay for scripts out of pocket if they were subjected to deductible. But all their other expenses, like medical-wise, like office visits, lab work, would be eligible under the GAP program. But they can't have a health savings account and a GAP plan at the same time. They're not, if you're doing a first dollar GAP program, it's not HSA compatible. You have to have at least a $1,350 deductible on the GAP in order to make it HSA compatible. So what a lot of brokers do is they do a first dollar strategy on the HSA plan design with no health savings account, because it's an IRS rule. It's not an insurance rule. It's double dipping per the IRS. You have a pre-tax GAP program that is going to pay for medical expenses, out-of-pocket expenses for the employee, that they're now putting money into their HSA account and rolling over year to year. So the IRS starts looking at that as a tax shelter, the HSA plan or the HSA account. They start looking at that as like a tax cheat almost, and that you're double dipping, right? Now, FSAs are fine. You can have an FSA and a GAP plan at the same time. So if a group wanted to have an FSA so that employees could put money into their FSA and then use that for their scripts or dental or whatever they want to use their FSA money for, and then use the GAP program to fund their doctor office visits, lab, hospital confinement, you can do that, because with an FSA, you use it or you lose it. And that's the problem with the IRS and the HSA accounts in GAP, is that you can continue to roll over your HSA money every single year. So, and we'll get more into, that's really getting into GAP 2.0 stuff, which we'll get more into on our next presentation that we do. But just to kind of, I want to just go over that just so everybody's sure, because I think there was a question on that already. So you can make it HSA compatible, but if you don't want to make it HSA compatible, you can still have a GAP program. So what are we trying to do when we address employer needs, right? We're essentially trying to lower the benefit costs, right? I mean, you know, medical cost trend for 2019 is projected at 6%. So essentially, as the premiums continue to increase for groups, especially on the more benefit-rich programs, the $10 copay plans. I mean, the word copay is going to be like the dodo. I don't know when it's going to be. I don't know if it's 4 years from now. I don't know if it's 6 years from now. But the word copay is going to be like the dodo. It's not going to exist anymore. Because what they're going to, the major medical carriers are just not giving you phenomenal rates on things that have copays. These $10 copay plans with $500 deductibles, the cost of them are just so outrageous that it's impossible for a group to almost afford a plan like that. So which is why you have more of these groups looking at HRAs and HSA strategies. Well, GAP is just another strategy on top of that, right? But what are we looking for as employee needs, right? You got the average employee medical out-of-pocket cost is $2,400 a year, right? You know, 63% of workers have an annual deductible of at least $1,000. You know, 3 in 5 bankruptcies are because of medical bills. So the employee challenge is, how do I, as this continues to trend, right? As I continue to trend from copays to deductible and coinsurance and out-of-pocket expenses in the $8,000 to $9,000 range, how do I wind up with a quality benefit program that the employees will actually want? And the way that you accomplish that is to have a primary insurance, a GAP program that is going to alleviate their issues, alleviate the problems of this. So that if you have a child and you have a $5,000 deductible, you don't wind up, you know, making $30,000 a year and you have a $5,000 medical bill for the birth of your child staring you at your face. Well, how does that average person, you know, afford that? Or how are they going to pay that back? So this allows that employee to not have to face these situations. Our GAP programs have benefit amounts, you know, specifically outpatient up to like $3,500, $3,700, $3,800. We can cover the average out-of-pocket expense of $2,470, and that's what we're trying to do, is make the whole group happy. We're not trying to make, you know, one person happy. We're trying, when we talk about first dollar coverage, we're trying to make the whole group happy. So if my medical expenses are only $500 for the year, well, great, OptiMed covered all that for you. Oh, I was a high utilizer. I was like $4,000 a year. Great. OptiMed paid the vast majority of it. But at least they're not filing bankruptcy because they have a $5,000 bill sitting in their face. So in action, right? This is an example of what we talk about with cost savings, right? So for example, this is a group of 25, right? Let's say their estimated savings, right, on a major medical plan by moving, right, from, let's say, $1,000 deductible to a $4,000 deductible. And they could see on a group of 25 an annual savings of $62,000 a year by doing that. We could come in with a cost of a GAP program that is $20,000 roughly, so that they could net $41,000 a year in annual savings. That's a big deal for a 25 life group. That's another person that they could hire. And as you continue to go up the ladder, as you see the groups increase, you know, if you're talking about a group of 350, that you could start looking into the $500,000 range in savings. That's gigantic. It's ginormous. So real life examples, like for example, we talk about, and we'll get into a little bit more inpatient, outpatient, but you know, things like outpatient surgery, right? They had our GAP program. They owed $1,075 for that service. That was their members' responsibility. OptiMed paid that. They went to the emergency room. OptiMed paid. They had a 2-day maternity stay. OptiMed paid. An outpatient knee surgery, to where the employee's responsibility in these actual examples were zero. So that they were able to get these services done without having to worry about how am I going to afford them. And when that employee who works for that 25 life group, that works for that 50 life group, has something like, oh my God, I had a 2-day maternity stay, my responsibility is $700, OptiMed paid all of it. It's phenomenal. So, inpatient, outpatient, eligible expenses. Hospital confinement, pretty simple. Injury and accident and illness are all eligible. Usually hospital confinement is going to require at least like a certain hour stay. We work with various different carry partners. Some have different requirements. Some are 24 hours, some are 18, some are 15. Regardless, inpatient means hospital confinement. And it doesn't matter if it's for injury or illness, it's still eligible under our inpatient benefit, which is important because you may run into other GAP carriers or GAP programs that are administrated out there where emergency room for sickness is never covered, or hospital confinement for sickness may not be covered. It's only covered for injury, unless it's an accident. It's more of like an accident policy rather than like a GAP program. Outpatient will cover you at an emergency room. So you go to the emergency room because you're sick. I think I'm having a heart attack. I'm not having a heart attack. I just have indigestion. I get sent home later with, you know, Pepto-Bismol like 2 hours later. We're not going to deny that claim. It's just going to be covered as an outpatient claim, right? Because they weren't hospital confined. They weren't admitted, but it's still eligible. We can do urgent care. We can do physician office, surgery, diagnostic testing. So when we look at the things that we cover under the GAP program, this isn't a fixed indemnity type program. It's not where we're giving you $300 per day for hospital confinement. Oh, we'll give you $50 towards that office visit. This is coming out of their bucket of money that they have for GAP. So therefore, if they have a $2,000 inpatient benefit and they're hospital confined and the bill comes in at $1,500, we would pay the entire $1,500 bill, and the employee would still have $500 left in inpatient expenses for the year. We actually pay off the EOB of the major medical program. Since we are not a fixed indemnity product, we need to know what your out-of-pocket was for that service. And then where did you go and what did you do? Was it a hospitalization stay? Was it an outpatient treatment? So that we can cover it either under your inpatient or your outpatient bucket of money. But essentially, regardless of how you structure inpatient, outpatient, the amounts, again, we're trying to accomplish that overall benefit strategy of lowering the major medical costs for the employer, giving good benefits for the employee, and making the broker additional commission. At the same time, giving all these or covering all these services so that the employee doesn't have to worry about, oh, cancer is not covered under the plan. Sorry, your chemotherapy treatments aren't covered under the plan. We cover cancer. It's more of like what we don't cover than what we do cover. So let's talk about a little bit about strategies as far as sales are concerned. So Of course, you want to go to a higher deductible plan, right? And add a GAP plan to one or more. You can offer it as a voluntary option, right? For that group that doesn't really care, like I talked about. I don't really care about my employees as far as the health insurance is concerned. I don't contribute much towards it, and I don't care if they have a $7,900 deductible or if they have a $500 deductible. I just want the cheapest possible plan, and I'm looking to put the least amount of money out of my pocket, and I don't care if my major medical plan stinks or not. Well, GAP as a voluntary option might be a good solution to that group. Offered as an employer paid, you can include GAP with an HRA or an HSA solution, adding an HDHP with, doing essentially an HSA plan, finding the money to pay GAP, replacing an HRA or an HSA with GAP, which happens more often than not. Those sales strategies, like I said, we're going to have another webinar and like a GAP 2.0 where I'll dive into more of these strategies and how to use them and specific type stuff. But for right now, I just wanted to give you a broad overview of how you can kind of utilize GAP, right? Where we see it utilized most is, yes, renewal situations where a group gets hit with a 10% rate increase and they move to a higher deductible health plan. We fill in the hole for the employee with the GAP program on a first dollar basis. Group saves money, employee has first dollar coverage, broker makes more money, everybody's happy. That's, a lot. But especially in the small group marketplace, you have an HRA situation where you have to go into a group and they like the concept of an HRA, right? But they don't like the exposure, meaning you got to show them what the worst case scenario is. If everybody hits the HRA, you could wind up owing X. Well, with GAP, it's premium, right? You're paying a premium amount to get this fully insured program. So it doesn't matter if the employees utilize it or not, you're always just going to pay that premium amount. So therefore, it works phenomenally with an HRA replacement strategy in the small group arena. And I would say that's probably number 2 where I see it, where group loves an HRA concept, they're 20 lives, but they don't like the exposure of it. And they don't want to have to fund, right? I don't have to worry about coming up with money next month because, somebody went to the emergency room and now I got to fund my HRA with $1,000 next month. They don't want to have to worry about that. With the GAP, it's just a straight premium every month, just like their major med on a list bill. So therefore, there is no worry or concern about utilization. So I would say those are the 2 biggest strategies that we've seen. But there's so many ways you can utilize GAP. And like I said, in the 2.0 version, we'll get more into that. But I wanted to kind of give everybody just a little taste of what you can do or some of the strategies that are involved with it. Now, we talk about GAP and HSAs, right? So we know it's not HSA, quote, compatible, right? But with a health savings account, we're just talking about the comparison between 2, right? If 18.4 million stayed in the hospital overnight, if the average length of a hospital stay is 5 days, and the average cost of an inpatient stay is about $2,100, so 136 million emergency room visits, an average cost of like $1,300. So when we're talking about a health savings account, it's on the responsibility of the employee to go ahead and pay for these expenses that we're talking about out of their HSA funds. So you're talking about them shouldering the load of having to fund this. And when, again, people are living more paycheck to paycheck, finding the disposable income to throw into a health savings account becomes more difficult. Conversely, as an employer, if you just put $50 into a health savings account every month, well, at the end of the year, I'll have $600. But what if I need to go to the emergency room and I get a $1,200 bill in month 3? I've only got $150 in my health savings account, and I have a $1,200 bill looking at me. What do they do then? So with a health savings, yes, is there benefits, to a health savings account? Sure. I always say the one group that would probably want to choose an HSA over a GAP program would be like a group of like high-paid, engineers. There's a group of 10 of them, and they all make 6 figures plus, and they look at their HSA as like a as a tax savings vehicle. Like I can lower my taxable income by throwing money into my health. So I put as much money as I can into my health savings account, whatever's allowable, because I have, quote unquote, the disposable income to do it. But many people don't have that ability, you know? So with GAP, you're paying a premium. So you get, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times what your premium is in benefits, right? So your carrier's taking a risk. You have, protection for those out-of-pocket expenses. It doesn't build up over time like an HSA. So if you have a $2,500 outpatient benefit and that bill comes in for $1,200, we're going to pay that $1,200 out of your $2,500 benefit, and now you have $1,300 left. And that could happen in month 1 or month 7, doesn't matter. So it gives that employee that not have to worry about, well, what happens in month 3 if I have to go to the emergency room, or what if I do because I have a maternity and I have a due date of March? How am I going to build up enough money into my health savings account in order to pay for this $3,000 bill that I'm going to be looking at? So with medical GAP, right, with our GAP program, many employees prefer to have our GAP program because it's very simple and easy. They don't have to worry about funding it. They know that they have a $5,000 inpatient benefit. So if they go to the hospital, they're hospital confined, I know there's $5,000 to pay for my out-of-pocket expense. And if my maximum out-of-pocket is $5,000, then if my first claim that I have is an inpatient hospital stay and it's for more than $5,000, the major med will pick up everything after 5. The employee is going to get a $5,000 benefit from us because the EOB is going to say they owe 5. They have a $5,000 inpatient benefit. Employee owes nothing. They're happy, right? I don't have to worry. And then I have $2,500 in outpatient benefit to pay for my emergency room visit, or the doctor's office that I needed to go to, or a lab test. I needed a strep throat test because I felt sick. Why go to the Minute Clinic? Because you don't want to pay a $50 copay to your doctor, right? So I'll just go to the Minute Clinic and I don't want to go see my doctor. You got a $50 copay. If you're on an HDHP plan and that's subjected to deductible, we'll pay that out of your $2,500 benefit. So if it's $150 to go to your doctor, you can go to your doctor, have a $150 bill, get a strep throat test for $10, $160. It comes out of that $2,500 benefit. Now, and it's just a rolling thing. So I don't have to worry, and I paid nothing out of pocket. So why would you go to the Minute Clinic and pay them whatever they charge, $20, $30? Why go pay a copay of $50? Or you could have a major medical plan that's subjected to deductible your office visits, and the OptiMed GAP plan picks up the cost of that, and you pay nothing. I think nothing sounds better than $50 or $20. So that's the power of GAP. It's going to make the employees thrilled about not the fact that they have a $5,000 deductible, but how we fill in that hole so that they don't have to worry about those out-of-pocket expenses. So why OptiMed? I mean, we've been in business for over 40 years. We're actually almost approaching 50. We have offices in, I'm in the Philadelphia, or it's really Newtown, Pennsylvania office. We're about 25 miles north of Philly. We have offices in Boca Raton, Florida, which is where our IT and, well, not IT and billing and accounting are located. We have an office in Atlanta. We have offices in Los Angeles, sales offices throughout the country. I mean, we're a full service TPA. That's what we are at our heart, right? OptiMed is a third party administrator. We're not the carrier on the program. We work with various different carriers on GAP. But what we do for those carriers is market and administrate these GAP programs for them because we're best in class in doing it. Like I said before, we do have other things like MEC and limited medical, dental, vision products. If you want more information on those, you can email your sales representative after the fact. But our claims, customer service, and what we do here are really top of industry. Now, how does the GAP plan work as far as getting your benefits as an employee? On your screen now is a sample ID card. And that is a hard plastic card that we mail to the employee. And what they're going to do is at the time of service, they're going to present that card to their provider along with their major medical card. And that's why I said it's kind of like medical gap, because if you have Medicare and you have a Medicare supplement policy, you do the exact same thing. When my grandmom goes to the doctor, she presents her Medicare card and her Medicare supplement card. When your employee is going to go to their doctor, they're going to present their GAP card and their major medical card. If my grandmom can figure out how to do that, I'm assuming that your 30-year-old employee can as well. Now, benefits are assignable, but providers don't necessarily have to accept assignment of benefits. And, you could have a provider where the spouse still does the books, right? And they don't know how to bill to a secondary insurer. So we've made this very simple for the employees. They can go to optimedhealth.com and submit their claim online. They can mail us the claim. Essentially, what we need in order to process the claim or start the processing of it is the explanation of benefits from the major medical carrier. So when they present their card to their provider, I always ask, because I've had our GAP plan, I always ask, do you bill the secondary insurance? Yes. Here's my primary card and I have my GAP insurance. So therefore, I know that that provider is going to go ahead and submit that bill for whatever I owe to OptiMed, and essentially I'll be taken care of. If they say, no, we don't take secondary insurance, you're going to have to work that on your own, then I know that I have to get my explanation of benefits and then submit that to OptiMed in order to get reimbursement. Now, when that happens, again, they can go online, they can scan or take that explanation of benefits that normally most of the carriers now have online access where they can download it. So you fill out your claim form online, attach it, send it off to us, and boom, you're off to the races. Now, I will say this, if we try to reach out, and this is the big difference in our administration compared to other GAP carriers, is that explanation of benefits is normally not going to have everything that we need on it in order to process the claim. It usually does not have CPT codes, diagnosis codes, things that we need in order to complete the claim. What OptiMed does is when we get that explanation of benefits and the claim form, we don't just simply turn around and deny it, frustrating the employee because they submitted something that they thought was eligible. Like, I thought you covered pregnancy. I was in the hospital. I submitted my EOB. It got denied. And then what happens? They complain to HR or the owner. Owner calls the broker. My employee went. This wasn't covered. Then they have to call the carrier. Why did you deny? Oh, well, they were missing a CPT code. Oh, okay. Then they have to call the employer back. Oh, they were missing the CPT code. The employee's got to call their provider and get them to send in the CPT code. What's a CPT code? And this whole circle of nonsense goes on, right? That is painful for all parties. So we figured that it would be much simpler if we just did one thing. When we get the claim form in the EOB, and if we're missing some information, we pick up the phone and we call the provider to try to get the information in order to process the claim. I know that sounds like we got that from some NASA scientist that, figured out how to do that. But yeah, we just figured out that it was real simple for us. Instead of creating that circle of pain for both the group, the employee, and the broker, is to simply pick up a phone and call the provider to try to get the missing information that we needed in order to pay the claim. And that is, when we talk about administrative stuff and customer service on our end, we really are best in class. We go the extra step, we go the extra mile in order to make sure we want groups to stay with us. My first group that came on for GAP 8 years ago is still with us today, going strong, because they value that more than they value the major medical plan, believe it or not. They have switched major medical carriers 4 or 5 times in that 8 years, and never once considered moving away from their GAP program, ever. And the reason why is that they've seen the value of when it doesn't matter with the major medical carriers, as long as most of the providers are covered in the area, what does it matter? Because the major medical plan never pays anyway. All I see are EOBs that you owe, you owe, you owe, you owe. So what does it matter if Blue Cross and Blue Shield says I owe, or UHC sends me something that says I owe? The only one that pays it? OptiMed. So they value OptiMed more than they value the major medical program. At least the employees do. And the employer likes it because what they normally do is as they graduate along, they start off with maybe a 2,000, 1,000 plan design to try to cover, you know, some of the hole because they're moving from like $1,000 deductible to 2 or 3. Then all of a sudden they get another renewal increase like 2, 3 years later of 20%, and we move them from a 3 to a $5,000 deductible and increase the gap from a 5 to, you know, 35, and we move along. And normally they'll look at different carriers or different, you know, plan designs to save money on the major med, and then just continue to fill in the hole with the GAP program. And you see some of the statistics that we have up there with average claim payment, 95% of them processed in 3 days. Valid claims, meaning clean claims, where we have all the information that we need in order to process the claim, usually is under 2 days. Again, when we have to call the provider and get that information, we're at the mercy of that provider. We attempt to call, but if they don't try to get us back that information over a certain period of time, we will go ahead and let the employee know that we've reached out to the provider. They're not responding and getting us back the information, so we have no other choice but to deny it at certain points. Most providers are pretty good at getting back to us, but some are not. But I just wanted to let you know that it's not 2 days for everything. If it's not clean, obviously we're not going to be able to get it done in 2 days. Average speed of answer, 80% of our calls are answered within 30 seconds by a live human being that can help, that can answer questions. And there's not 19 million prompts to get through to somebody in customer service. I think it might be 2. Yeah. So when I say we have phenomenal customer service, I mean we have phenomenal customer service. We have an online portal where employees can go in, create a username and password for themselves, view explanations of benefits, see that we received the claim, order an ID card for themselves. So again, when it comes to customer service, we really are truly at the head of the class, and especially when it's GAP, because believe it or not, GAP is harder to administrate than a straight major med. And you would think that that's crazy talk, but it's not. Because when you're the primary insurer, 99.99999% of providers are going to accept assignment of benefits and bill to that major medical carrier, right? So they get the claim. If they're missing information, the provider would normally get them that information, but they're normally not missing things, right? So it's much easier to administrate that. We have to pay on top of, so we need to know what the member's responsibility is. We have to get things like explanation of benefits, HCPA forms. It's not as easy as it is to administrate a major medical plan as it is to administrate a GAP program. And because it's not easy, a lot of people fail at it. And a lot of people have either miserable customer service or miserable claims adjudication. And that's where we really shine when it comes to our competition, because we have top of class in both of those areas. So what are some advantages, right, for you? Yeah, provide options, right? Just don't walk in like every other broker with the same HSA, HRA solution. Walk in with something different, a GAP program, right? It's going to reduce the need for other coverages. You don't have to sell like a critical illness or an accident program or this or that most people, because of pre-X or whatever it is, are never going to cash in on. The GAP program, if you have $1 in out-of-pocket expense that's eligible under the plan, we're going to pay at least $1. You'll at least cash in on something of it, right? I mean, it's really a differentiator. Not everybody has bought into the concept yet. It's growing. It's getting more popular. It's why we're having more presentations and more brokers are interested in it every single month. But it's a differentiator to the guy or girl who's going to go in to a group and sit there and say, oh, we'll go with an HSA and then fund it. Put, you know, you can put $2,500, so put $200. You can go in with an actual differential and strategy that'll save more money than doing something like that, or limit the exposure of an HRA and sell a GAP plan, which creates an additional revenue stream for you. You're going to make 15% first year and renewal on the GAP premium. So therefore, you're going to grow your business, meaning your revenue, without having to do anything. You don't have to bring on one more group into your block and make 25 to 50% more next year than what you did the previous year, just by implementing this strategy. And again, it's not a strategy that it harms. You're helping the employer. You're saving them money. There's no reason to do it if you're not saving them money. You're saving them money as opposed to what they're paying now. So the employer should be thrilled. And so should the employee with first dollar coverage for their out-of-pocket expenses. So since everybody wins in the situation, why aren't you doing it? Now, I talked a little bit about the value add, but in addition to the actual GAP benefits themselves, we include at no additional charge patient advocacy. So let's say, for example, you had a surgery, you got an explanation of benefits that says you owe $4,000, but your outpatient benefit for that outpatient surgery is only $2,000. If the employee or a member calls us on their behalf, we can reach out to that provider to try to help negotiate it. Normally what happens is that they send us paperwork that the employee has to fill out. They ask things about income and stuff like that. We send it off the employee gets it back to us, we send it off to the provider, and we've had success with patient advocacy. We don't do it automatically, so just make note of that. The member has to call us and specifically say, you know, is there any way you can help, right? Telephonic doctor office visits. This is huge. We provide telephonic doctor office visits through a company called iSelect at no additional charge and no copay for the employee. The employee can call our telephonic doctor office service as many times as they want during the course of the year to get a free consultation with a US-based licensed doctor. They can do it via video, I think, and do it via phone. So you forgot your medication on a trip. It's something simple. Like I always use the example because it actually did happen to me. I was working in my backyard. I got poison ivy on my arms. So back then what I did is I booked an appointment with my doctor, waited in the waiting room for 40 minutes, paid my copay of 25 bucks. He looked at me for 2 seconds and said, yeah, you got poison ivy, wrote me 2 prescriptions. I walked out of the office an hour and a half later, had to drop off the script to the pharmacy. Then on my way back home, because I did it at lunchtime, on my way back home, I got the prescription. Or if I had telemedicine, now what I can do is I can simply call iSelect, tell the doctor over the phone that, yes, I was working in my backyard, I have poison ivy. He can call a prescription into my pharmacy, and on the way home, I can go pick it up and not have to do all the drop-off and the nonsense. So it's a great tool for helping with utilization to the major medical plan, right? Because for every telephonic doctor office visit that employee uses, is if you're on a copay plan, let's say we're not trying to cover the office visits, that's one less, charge that's going against the major medical plan utilization. But 2, it gives the ability for the employee to call a US-based doctor 24/7 and get a free consultation. So, and again, it's no copay. If there was like a $30 copay to use it, I'd be like, yeah, it's nice. This is no charge to the member, and they can use it as much as they want. We also include an EAP. They can get things like counseling, for mental nervous or mental health conditions. They can get attorney consultations. It's a full EAP. There's a wellness advice, like it's a wellness nurse line where they can get information on like things like smoking cessation, weight loss. And we do COBRA administration on the GAP. If you would like us to do COBRA administration on other lines of coverage, like major med, dental, vision, we can do that. There's just an additional charge to do that. But if you just want us to straight administrate the COBRA administration on the GAP program, and that's it, we can do that, and that's included at no additional charge as well. So if the group is a small group, doesn't have a COBRA administrator, we can administrate all their stuff, or if they just want us to do the GAP because they can handle the major med, we'll just do the GAP. So save the date for our GAP 2.0 webinar. It's going to be on 9/20 and 9/25. And again, I'll go into more details about HRA replacement. I'll get into details about how to find money to pay for the GAP program, get a little bit deeper into benefit plan design, stuff like that. And it's just a little bit more in-depth. This is just trying to give you an overview of the product. This will be a more in-depth presentation. If you want to get proposals, more information, as I said, contact your group sales representative. They will be able to get you anything that you need as far as proposals, brochures, information that you need in order to go out and present a group. Can go into more strategy. If you don't want to wait for the GAP 2.0 thing, ask them a question if you have one. They'll be more than happy to help you. You should have their contact information. In case you don't, you just call into the 800-482-8770 number. I think it's option 4 for sales, and you can just get dumped into sales if you have no idea who your group sales rep is. But you got the invite from them, so you should know. But that's kind of it as far as the presentation is concerned. There's a bunch of questions. If you have any that you're on still on the line, you want to type them in, I'll look at those now. First question was the first dollar HSA. No, you can't do a GAP program without a $13.50 deductible and make it HSA compatible. We kind of went over that. Minimum group size is 5 enrolled or 10%, whichever is greater. The way GAP is rated or priced is based off of age. We have 3 age bands: under 40, 40 to 49, and over 50. So if you use age banded rates, you need 5 enrolled or 10%, whichever is greater. So unless you have a group over 50, you need 5 enrolled. We can composite rate groups of 25 or more, but they're going to have different participation. Sometimes if they're smaller groups between 20 and 50, or 25 and 50, they want employer contribution. But we can composite rate larger groups of 25 or more. You talk to your sales representative, and it's in the proposal what the percentage of the participation and employer contribution would be, but that's only on composite rates. You can't have an HSA, again, another question, you can't have a health savings account and a GAP plan at the same time. It's an IRS rule. So you can have an HSA major medical plan that doesn't have an HSA account and have GAP to fill in the deductible hole. Hope that makes sense. If you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to your rep. The process of reimbursement is essentially, like I said, if they hand in their card at the time of service to their provider, we'll pay the provider directly because they're filing the claim to us. If the member files the claim because the provider is unwilling for some reason to do so, then we would pay the employee directly. Group size, and I already went over that, and that's it. So that's it for the presentation. I'd like to thank everybody who attended the presentation today. Again, if you have any questions about the products, feel free to reach out to your group sales representative, and they'll get you the information that you need. And thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on our GAP 2.0 webinar. And thanks again for attending our presentation today.